How a Jordan fan can be in full support of LeBron James. I'm Tony. Welcome back to Streetball Strategies.
Going hard, we don't ever stop. Our ambition got us working all around the clock. Our competition is ourselves, we told ourselves to catch up. We push the pedal to the metal, we don't ever let up.
Today's video is about how a Michael Jordan fan, me, who thinks Michael Jordan is the best player in history, how I can still be in full support of LeBron James despite that. Now, for those of you who are thinking like, obviously you can do both, like it's easy and obvious as to how you could support both players at the same time. The reason this video has come up is because, specifically because of this channel, I'm in many Facebook groups about basketball. And I don't know, 3 or 4 of those groups, they seem to exist solely so that LeBron fans and Jordan fans can like consistently argue and irritate each other day in and day out. Now, thankfully, these are very few people. Like I'm in 30 plus groups, and only a small percentage of them seem to have this problem, and only a small percentage of people in those groups are, you know, they seem dead set at trying to argue their side on a daily basis and posting like hatred on a regular basis. Yes, it is very few people, but it is very prevalent in the pockets of social media where it exists. And obviously this is an opinion video, so it's going to go on the About Me playlist on this channel, and if you disagree with my opinion, that's perfectly fine with me. I have no problem with you having a different opinion than I do. This video is just for fun. It's also going to be kind of like a thought experiment to say, like, you know, have you ever tried to think about things in this way, from this perspective? So let's talk about how I can be a fan and support both players at the same time. So the main reason why I can be a Michael Jordan fan and think he's the best player, or at least a better player, more preferred player to me than LeBron James, and still completely support LeBron James, is because I have basketball principles. And when I say principles, I'm not talking like morality principles, like at least in this very specific case. Like, for instance, if I were to say, yeah, Michael Jordan is my favorite player because I was a teenager when Michael Jordan was at his peak and doing his thing, and because I was, you know, at the right place at the right time when that was happening, thus he's my favorite player, and I could never be taught, I could never be swayed, you know, to think any other player is going to be better because it was right time, right place for me and Michael Jordan. To me, that's shallow. There's not a whole lot of substance there. It's not really all that, you know, good of a point to just make that your main case as to why your favorite player is your favorite player just because they were in the right place at the right time in your life, and thus they became your favorite player. To me, that's like, you know, you're in school, you have a test coming up, and so you memorize whatever you need to memorize in order to pass the test. Then you take the test, you pass it, and then you forget everything you memorized. As opposed to having like principles wherein instead of just memorizing stuff for the sake of a test, you actually learn the material so that not only do you pass the test, but then you retain all that information afterwards because you actually had the principle of actually learning that subject. To me, it's the same way when it comes to having my favorite basketball players. There are certain principles, standards, priorities that I have that lead me to having those players as my favorite. It's not just because they were right place, right time. So because I have a certain set of principles, standards as to why players become my favorite, that means multiple players can be my favorite, and I can have respect for multiple players at the same time. Just because I think one player is better or I prefer one over the other doesn't mean I don't respect the other players. So when it comes to what my actual principles are for how I choose who my favorite players are, they go like this. So I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's not really an order of importance, right? It's just, you know, to differentiate point from point. So number one and 2. The players that are going to be my favorite players and thus have the most value and respect for me, they have to have the highest degree of skill and the highest degree of ability. Now understand, those are two separate things. A lot of players, coaches, commentators, a lot of times they put those two together as if skill and ability are one and the same. And to me, they are not. There's distinct differences between the two. So skill to me is stuff you can learn and thus get better at because you learn and grow and progress. When I say abilities, that means being able to actually use those skills in a constructive basketball sense. So for instance, you can have the skill, grow the skill, earn the skill of like reading the defense or understanding when, how, and where to run the proper pick and roll. But using it, that's the ability. So you have the skill of how and when to read a defense or run a pick and roll. You have that skill, but do you have the ability to actually execute it? Do you see the differences to me? So it's like you can learn stuff and then you can do stuff. That's skill, that's ability. For me to say that a player is my favorite, right, they have to have the highest skill and the highest ability. Now when we get to my third principle, this is when we start to really sort of differentiate ourselves and separate players, because for instance out here at the park, right, you can have a lot of players who have really high skill and really high ability, but my third point is talent, right? They have to have the highest talent. Out here recreationally, talent is usually the defining separation between players. And even in the NBA, all the NBA players are obviously talented, but even at that level, there's still different levels of talent. So you also have to have the highest level of talent for me to consider you one of my most valuable favorite players. And then to take it up another notch, to get more separation, to really start to really narrow down, you know, the players that I think are the best, is you have to achieve the highest level of success. So not just individual success like MVPs and players, you know, defensive player of the years and rookie of the stuff like that, like the individual awards, not just that, but then have team accomplishments like numerous like conference championship, NBA championships, like NBA titles, hopefully multiple NBA titles, because you have players who in today's NBA who they may have won maybe 2 NBA titles, but still LeBron has 4, Steph Curry has 4, you know, there's levels here when it comes to success. So now we're really narrowing that pool, right? To have the highest skill, highest talent, highest ability, highest success, like that's very few players in modern day basketball. And by modern day, I mean like from Magic and Larry on to now. Multiple championships, multiple MVPs, like that's very few players in the grand scheme of the NBA. But then lastly for me, and probably most importantly for me, those players have to have those 4, plus they also have to be known, it's publicly known, like certain players, they also they have a full-out love obsession, you know, with just the general game of and sport of basketball. Now let me be clear, it's basketball, the game, the sport that I'm talking about, not specifically the NBA, because of course, if you're in the NBA, you love the fact that you're famous, you love the fact that you're rich. Like, I'm not talking about those factors. I'm talking about just the game, just the sport. Like, if the NBA didn't exist, these people, these players would still be obsessed, lovingly obsessed with basketball, even if they never made a dime from basketball, even if they were never famous at all, they would still love and have a loving obsession with the game of basketball. So like for instance, Nikola Jokic, right? He fits into all 4 of those categories, but the first 4, but he is notorious for the fact that off the court, he doesn't really care much about basketball. And that's perfectly fine. I don't think that's, you know, anything against him at all. I don't have any problem with that at all. But just for me, because I am obsessed with basketball, I have like a loving obsession with and for basketball. Players that also share that, I feel more of a kinship to, right? So for me personally, I just value those players more. And when you put those 5 principles together, now the pool of players that fit into all 5 of those are pretty small. And yes, you know, you could say maybe, I don't know, a dozen players in modern NBA fit into all 5 of those categories. But for me, when I think about NBA history and the players that stick out the most to me that fit into those categories and that I personally identify with, like I personally can relate to, the 3 that stick out most to me are Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and LeBron James. Sure, you could maybe throw like a Magic Johnson in there. Magic Johnson's a little before my time, therefore I don't really identify and relate to him as much. So those are the 3 that really stick out to me, in my opinion. So, and thus, because those 3 players fit so perfectly for me into those 5 principles, I can support them and respect them all equally. Even though I'm a Jordan fan, and I think he's the better player, I can still fully support LeBron James. Now, what do I mean when I say I support him and hope that he's successful? What I just basically mean is I hope he has a prosperous career, a long, productive career moving forward. Even though he's 39 and in his 21st season, I still want him to be successful. I want him to go deep into the playoffs and have a successful season year after year. As far as winning championships go, I don't care. I don't care whether he wins more or not. For those of you who are subscribers to the channel, you'll know that I'm a casual NBA fan at best. I don't really watch much regular season NBA. I do follow it, I just don't watch it very much. But I do lock in for the playoffs, especially the second round and beyond. But I don't really have a dog in the fight. I don't really have a favorite player or team because the Detroit Pistons suck, and even though I live in Michigan, I have a video about how I'm a fair weather bandwagon fan. I like being that way. I do it on purpose. And so because I don't have a dog in the NBA fight, I don't really care who wins. Whether or not LeBron James wins more championships, he's not really going to shift on my opinion as far as like, I think he's one of the greatest. I just don't think he's better than Jordan. He'd have to do something unprecedented, unforeseeable, like win 7 championships altogether before he retires. Maybe then I could change my opinion. And let's be clear, I'm fine. I'm fine with acknowledging and saying LeBron James is the better player. If that's the way it turns out, and it's undeniable that by the end of his career, LeBron James is the better NBA player than Michael Jordan, I have no problem saying that, acknowledging that, agreeing with that. However, that's not going to change the fact that my opinion is that I am more of a Jordan fan regardless. Like, LeBron James could be the best, and that's fine, but Michael Jordan is still going to be my favorite player, at least over LeBron James. Also, in that same vein, when it comes to basketball, the NBA, watching games, especially in the playoffs, again, I don't care who wins. All I want to see, right, I want super high quality, super competitive basketball where the games come down to a buzzer beater every time and for every series to go 7 games. That's what I want. I don't care who wins. I don't care who gets the championship. Like, I'm such a casual fan that even though I will watch every second and every dribble of the NBA Finals in June, come October, unless and until I'm reminded of who won the championship back in June, I'll completely forget by the time October comes around and the next NBA season starts. That's how casual I am and how much I don't care who wins the NBA championship. It's not that it doesn't matter to me, it's just that once the finals are done and over with, it just completely leaves my mind until the next season starts. And whoever happens to be the champion is the championship, and good for them. The bottom line is, because I have a certain criteria, principles for how and why I respect and value basketball players, multiple players can fit into it, as they do, and I can support them equally. Even though I prefer one over the other, doesn't mean that I think one is bad just because I think one is better. That's how a Michael Jordan fan can be in full support of LeBron James. The bottom line is, I'm a basketball fanatic. I love the game. I love the sport. If the NBA never existed and none of these NBA players never were born, I would still love the sport and the game. It just so happens that the NBA does exist, and thus these NBA players do exist, and they have exhibited this high level quality of basketball that I can then apply those 5 principles to, and these players happen to fit into these principles. And so I respect them, I value them all equally, even though I have my preferences as who I prefer and who I think is the best. It doesn't matter to me. There's no, when you get to that sort of top high level, to me, there's no more levels at that point. It's like all equal, all the same value, all the same respect. So I want to thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, if you found it helpful or insightful, if it gave you some kind of, other kind of perspective, mindset to think about, these kinds of topics, and maybe, I made some points that you would not have thought of before, then please subscribe to the channel if you liked this video. Also, make sure you hit that thanks button down below. So if you hit that thanks button and let me know what your opinion as to who's the best and why, if you hit that thanks button, it's going to make your comment stand out from, it's going to highlight it from any other comment. And not only that, but it also directly supports the channel when you hit that thanks button. So for anybody that does, know I genuinely appreciate it. As always, like, share, comment like I said. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified whenever any video goes live on this channel. And until then, see you guys next week.
Winning is the only option. You can try, but you can't stop. We feel the fire burning in our soul. On the front line, 3